The auditorium was packed that Saturday morning. Hundreds of people sat in red velvet seats, fanning themselves with programs, waiting for the next performer. The National Young Artists Piano Competition was one of the biggest events of the year. Kids from all over the country came here to show what they could do. Most of them had been playing since they could walk. Most of them had private teachers, expensive lessons, and parents who could afford to fly them across the country for a single performance. And then there was Lily. She stood backstage, peeking through the heavy curtain at the crowd. Her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. She was 8 years old. Her dress was borrowed from a neighbor, a simple blue thing that her mother had stayed up all night adjusting so it would fit. Her shoes were a size too big, stuffed with tissue paper at the toes so they wouldn't slip off when she walked. The boy who had just finished playing was 16. He had performed a complicated piece without a single mistake. The audience had clapped politely and the judges had nodded with approval. Now he walked past Lily backstage, barely glancing at her. Why would he? She was just a little kid. She didn't belong here. Everyone could see that. Lily's mother stood beside her, holding her hand. Her grip was warm and steady, the way it always was when Lily felt scared. "You don't have to do this," her mother whispered. "We can go home right now. No one will think any less of you." But Lily shook her head. They had come too far to turn back now. It had taken them 2 days to get here. They didn't have money for plane tickets, so they had driven. 14 hours in their old car, the one that made a funny noise every time they went over 50 miles per hour. They had slept at rest stops along the highway, her mother in the front seat and Lily curled up in the back with a blanket. They had eaten sandwiches that her mother had packed in a cooler because restaurants were too expensive. When they finally arrived in the city, Lily had pressed her face against the car window and stared at the tall buildings, the busy streets, the people rushing everywhere. It was so different from their small town back home, where everyone knew everyone and the biggest building was the church on Main Street. Now, standing backstage, Lily tried to remember why she had wanted to come here in the first place. It had started 3 years ago when she was 5. That was the year everything changed. That was the year her father got sick. He had been a musician, not a famous one but a good one. He played piano at a little jazz club downtown, the kind of place where people went to listen and talk quietly over drinks. Every night when he came home, he would sit at the old upright piano in their living room and play for Lily. Sometimes it was something fast and happy. Sometimes it was slow and sad, but it was always beautiful. "Music is magic," he used to tell her. "It can say things that words can't. It can make people feel things they didn't know they could feel." Lily would sit beside him on the piano bench, watching his fingers move across the keys like they had a mind of their own. She was too small to play herself, but she would rest her hands on her lap and imagine that one day she could make sounds like that too. Then one autumn her father started coughing. At first no one thought much of it. People get coughs all the time, but this one didn't go away. It got worse. Soon he was too tired to play at the club. Then he was too tired to play at home. Then he was too tired to get out of bed. The doctors did everything they could, but sometimes everything isn't enough. Lily was 5 years old when her father died. She didn't fully understand what death meant, not really. All she knew was that one day he was there and then he wasn't. The house went quiet. Her mother stopped playing his records. The piano sat in the corner of the living room, untouched, gathering dust. For a long time, Lily didn't want to look at it. It reminded her too much of him. But then one afternoon, about a year after he passed, something happened. Lily was home alone. Her mother was working late like she always did now. 2 jobs just to pay the rent. Lily was supposed to be doing her homework, but she couldn't focus. She kept looking at the piano. Finally, she walked over to it. She sat down on the bench. It felt bigger than she remembered, or maybe she was just smaller. She lifted the cover and looked at the keys. They were yellowed with age, some of them chipped at the edges. She pressed one. A single note rang out in the empty room. And just like that, she started to cry. But she didn't stop playing. She pressed another key, then another. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know how to read music or where to put her fingers, but something inside her needed to make sound. Something inside her needed to fill the silence. From that day on, Lily taught herself to play. She didn't have lessons. Her mother couldn't afford them. She didn't have books or teachers or anyone to show her what to do, but she had something else. Her grandmother had given her a second-hand tablet for Christmas, one with a cracked screen and a battery that only lasted a few hours. And on that tablet, Lily discovered a whole world. She watched videos of pianists playing. She watched tutorials that showed where to put her fingers. She watched the same clips over and over again, pausing and rewinding, trying to copy what she saw. It was slow. It was hard. Sometimes she got so frustrated she wanted to give up, but she never did. Because every time she sat at that piano, she felt close to her father again. The community center down the street had an old piano that nobody used. Lily started going there after school. The keys were sticky and some of them didn't work right, but she didn't care. She played for hours until her fingers hurt and her back ached. The janitor, an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, noticed her. He never said much, but he started staying late so she could keep practicing. Sometimes he would put on classical music from his phone, letting it play softly in the background while she worked. He never told her she was talented. He never made a big deal out of it. He just said the same thing every time she left. "See you tomorrow, little one." And she always came back. That was how she ended up here at this competition. A teacher at her school had heard her playing one day and nearly dropped her coffee. She had submitted a video of Lily to the competition without telling anyone. When the acceptance letter came, Lily's mother had cried. Not sad tears, happy ones, proud ones. Now Lily stood backstage, her borrowed dress and her two big shoes and her pounding heart. The announcer's voice came through the speakers. "Next, we have Lily, age 8, from Tennessee." She heard murmurs in the audience. 8, really? She could imagine what they were thinking. This should be interesting, poor thing. What are her parents thinking? Her mother squeezed her hand one last time. "Remember what your father always said," she whispered. Lily nodded. She remembered. Music is magic. She took a deep breath, stepped out from behind the curtain, and walked toward the piano. The stage lights were brighter than anything Lily had ever seen. They felt hot on her face, like standing too close to an oven. She could barely see the audience beyond the first few rows. Everything past that was just darkness, filled with the sounds of people shifting in their seats and whispering to each other. The piano sat in the center of the stage. It was enormous. A grand piano, black and shiny, the kind she had only ever seen in videos. It looked like something from a dream. Back home, she practiced on an old upright with missing keys and pedals that stuck. This was something else entirely. She walked toward it slowly, her two big shoes making soft sounds against the wooden floor. Each step felt like it took forever. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, watching, waiting, wondering what this little girl thought she was doing up here. The judges sat at a long table near the front of the stage. There were 3 of them, 2 men and 1 woman. All of them were famous pianists. Lily had watched videos of them playing. They had performed in concert halls all over the world. They had spent their entire lives dedicated to music, and now they were looking at her with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. She knew what those smiles meant. They were being nice. They didn't expect much. How could they? She was 8 years old, the youngest competitor by at least 4 years. Most kids her age were still learning to play simple songs, nursery rhymes with one hand. And here she was, about to perform in front of people who had heard the best pianists in the world. The head judge, an older man with silver hair and glasses, leaned toward his microphone. "Hello there," he said warmly. "You must be Lily. It says here you're from Tennessee. Is that right?" Lily nodded. Her throat felt too dry to speak. "And you're 8 years old?" She nodded again. The judge glanced at his colleagues. One of them raised an eyebrow slightly. The other made a small note on her clipboard. Lily saw it all. She understood. "Well then," the head judge said, "whenever you're ready, sweetheart, take your time." Lily reached the piano bench. It was too high for her. She had to climb up onto it, her feet dangling above the pedals. Someone in the audience made a small sound, almost like a laugh, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. She looked down at the keys. They were perfect. White and black, stretching out in front of her like a road she had traveled 1,000 times before. But somehow, right now, they looked foreign, unfamiliar, like she had never seen a piano in her life. Her hands were shaking. She thought about her father. She thought about the way he used to sit at their old piano at home, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes half closed, completely lost in the music. He never looked nervous. He never looked scared. He just played, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But Lily wasn't her father. She was just a kid who had taught herself from videos on a cracked tablet, a kid who had never had a real lesson, a kid who had no business being on this stage. She heard her mother's words in her head, "You don't have to do this. We can go home right now." Maybe she was right. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe Lily should just climb down from this bench, walk off this stage, and go back to Tennessee where she belonged. No one would blame her. No one expected her to succeed anyway. She looked out at the darkness beyond the lights. Somewhere out there, her mother was watching. Her mother, who had worked double shifts for years just to keep food on the table. Her mother, who had driven 14 hours and slept in the car so Lily could have this chance. Her mother, who had never stopped believing in her, even when Lily didn't believe in herself. And beyond her mother, somewhere even further, her father was watching too. She believed that. She had to believe that. Because if she didn't, then what was any of this for? She closed her eyes. She remembered the first time she had really played, not just pressing keys but actually playing. It was about 6 months after her father died. She had been at the community center, alone with the old piano, the janitor sweeping floors somewhere in the back. She had been trying to learn a song she had heard in one of her videos. A simple melody but beautiful. She had practiced it over and over, getting it wrong, starting again, getting frustrated, almost giving up. And then suddenly, she got it right. The notes came out the way they were supposed to. The melody floated through the empty room like something alive. And in that moment, Lily felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. She felt him right there beside her, like he had never left. She had cried so hard that day. The janitor had found her sitting at the piano, tears streaming down her face, and he had just sat down quietly next to her. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat there with her until she was ready to stop. When she finally looked up at him, he had smiled gently. "That was beautiful," he said. "Your daddy would be proud." She had never told him about her father, but somehow he knew. Maybe he had heard it in her playing. Maybe music really could say things that words couldn't. That was the day Lily understood why she played. It wasn't to impress anyone. It wasn't to win competitions or become famous. It was because playing made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. It made her feel like love didn't end just because someone was gone. Now, sitting on this stage, under these blinding lights, with hundreds of strangers watching and waiting, she tried to find that feeling again. She took a deep breath. She placed her fingers on the keys. They felt cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, familiar, like coming home. The piece she had chosen was difficult, way too difficult for someone her age. When she had told the competition organizers what she wanted to play, there had been a long pause on the phone. "Are you sure?" they had asked. "That's a very advanced piece. Wouldn't you rather play something simpler?" But Lily didn't want to play something simpler. She wanted to play this, because this was the piece her father used to play. The one he would perform on special nights at the jazz club when the crowd was just right and the mood was perfect. The one he had played for her mother on their wedding anniversary, right there in their living room, while Lily sat on the floor and watched with wide eyes. This piece meant everything to her, and if she was going to play it, she was going to play it here, now, in front of everyone. The audience was completely silent. The judges were watching. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath. Lily thought about her father one more time. "Play from your heart, baby girl," she imagined him saying. "That's all you ever have to do." She pressed the first key, and the music began. The note rang out through the auditorium, pure and clear. It hung in the air for a moment like a question waiting to be answered. Then Lily pressed another key, and another, and slowly, carefully, the melody started to take shape. It was soft at first, gentle, like a whisper, the kind of music you might hear in a dream floating just at the edge of your mind. Lily kept her eyes closed. She didn't need to see the keys. She knew where they were. She had practiced this piece so many times that her fingers remembered every note, every pause, every breath. The judges leaned forward in their seats. Something was happening, something none of them had expected. This little girl, this 8-year-old in her borrowed dress and her 2 big shoes, was about to change everything. The music started slow, soft, like the first rays of sunlight coming through a window in the early morning. Lily's fingers moved gently across the keys, drawing out each note with care, letting them hang in the air before moving to the next. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just playing. In the front row, a woman tilted her head slightly. She had been checking her phone a moment ago, waiting for this to be over so she could watch her own son perform later. But now her phone sat forgotten in her lap. Something about this music was different. The head judge noticed it too. He had been prepared to smile politely, nod encouragingly, and give this little girl a participation score that wouldn't embarrass her. He had seen this before. Parents who pushed their kids too hard, too fast. Children who weren't ready for this level of competition. It was always a bit sad to watch. But this was not what he expected. The melody grew. It started to build layer upon layer like clouds gathering before a storm. Lily's small hands stretched across the keys in ways that shouldn't have been possible for someone her size. She had to reach, had to move quickly from one end of the keyboard to the other. It wasn't perfect. A trained eye could see the adjustments she made, the little jumps where other pianists could simply stretch. But there was something else happening here, something that had nothing to do with technique. The music was alive. It breathed, it moved, it told a story without using any words, and everyone in that auditorium could feel it. The female judge, a woman who had performed in symphony halls across Europe, slowly removed her glasses. Her eyes were starting to sting. She didn't understand it. She had heard this piece performed by masters, by people who had dedicated their entire lives to perfecting every single note. And yet none of those performances had ever made her feel like this. What was this child doing? Lily didn't know what was happening in the audience. She had forgotten about them. She had forgotten about the judges, the lights, the competition. She had even forgotten where she was. All that existed was the piano and the music and the memory of her father sitting beside her. She could almost feel him there. Not like a ghost, not like something scary, just a presence, warm and familiar, like he had never really left at all, like he had been waiting all this time for her to find him again. The piece moved into its middle section. This was the hardest part. The notes came faster now, tumbling over each other like water rushing down a mountain. Lily's fingers flew across the keys. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly, her eyes still closed, her face completely focused. She made a small mistake, a single note that came out slightly wrong. In any other competition, the judges would have marked it down. They would have made a note on their clipboards and moved on. But here, in this moment, no one even noticed. Because the emotion pouring out of this little girl was so powerful that one wrong note couldn't even begin to break the spell. In the back of the auditorium, a man stood against the wall. He had come in late, just looking for a place to sit for a few minutes before his meeting across the street. He had planned to rest his feet, check his email, and leave. But now he couldn't move. His feet were rooted to the floor. His email was forgotten. All he could do was listen. He thought about his own daughter. She was about this girl's age. He had been so busy with work lately that he had missed her school play last month. She had cried and he had promised to make it up to her, but he never did. There was always something else. Always another meeting, another deadline, another reason to say next time. Standing there, listening to this music, he felt something crack open inside his chest. He made himself a promise right then. Tonight, he would go home early. He would sit with his daughter. He would listen to her talk about her day. He would be there. That was what this music was doing. It wasn't just sound. It was something deeper. It was reaching into people's hearts and finding the things they had buried there, the regrets, the love, the memories they had tried to forget. Second judge, a man in his 50s who had been playing piano since he was 4 years old, found himself thinking about his mother. She had passed away 3 years ago. She was the one who had first put his hands on a piano. She was the one who had believed in him when no one else did. He hadn't cried at her funeral. He had told himself he needed to be strong. But now, sitting in this auditorium, listening to an 8-year-old girl play her heart out, he felt tears sliding down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't care who saw. The music began to slow again. The storm was passing. The clouds were breaking apart, letting the light shine through. Lily's fingers gentled on the keys, drawing out the final phrases of the piece with the same tenderness she had started with. She thought about the last time she had seen her father smile. It was a few days before he died. He had been so weak by then, barely able to lift his head from the pillow. But when Lily had climbed onto his bed and snuggled against him, he had smiled, and he had whispered something she would never forget. "You're going to do amazing things, baby girl. I just know it." She had shaken her head. She was only 5. She didn't know what amazing things meant. All she knew was that she wanted her daddy to get better. She wanted him to come downstairs and play the piano again. She wanted everything to go back to the way it was before. But it never did. And for a long time, she thought those amazing things he talked about would never happen either. Now on this stage, she understood. This was what he meant. Not fame, not trophies, not being the best. Just this. Sitting at a piano and playing from her heart, sharing something real with the world, connecting with people she had never met through something that words could never explain. The final notes came, soft as a whisper, gentle as a goodbye. Lily held the last chord, letting it ring out through the auditorium, feeling it vibrate through her whole body. Then she slowly lifted her fingers from the keys. Silence. Complete and total silence. For a moment nothing happened. The audience sat frozen. The judges stared. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Lily opened her eyes. The lights were still bright, still hot on her face. She blinked, suddenly remembering where she was, the stage, the competition, the hundreds of people watching her. Had she done something wrong? Why was everyone so quiet? She looked at the judges. The head judge was leaning forward in his seat, his mouth slightly open, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The woman beside him was pressing a hand to her chest, her glasses still off, her eyes red and wet. The third judge was just staring at her, tears openly running down his face. Lily felt her heart drop. She had messed up, she must have. Why else would they look like that? Then, from somewhere in the middle of the audience, someone started clapping. It was just one person at first, a single pair of hands breaking the silence. Then another joined in, and another, and suddenly the whole auditorium erupted. People were standing. They were clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. Some of them were crying. Some of them were laughing. One woman in the front row was doing both at the same time. Lily sat frozen on the piano bench, her small hands still resting in her lap, trying to understand what was happening. Then she saw her mother. She had come out from backstage. She was standing at the edge of the curtain, her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But but she was smiling, smiling so wide it looked like her face might break. And in that moment, Lily understood. She hadn't messed up at all. She had done something extraordinary. The applause seemed to go on forever. Wave after wave of clapping, cheering, people calling out things Lily couldn't quite hear over the noise. She sat on the piano bench, her small body frozen, not sure what she was supposed to do next. Was she supposed to stand up, bow, walk off the stage? Nobody had told her. She looked toward the wings where her mother was still standing. Her mother made a small gesture with her hands, miming standing up and bowing. Lily nodded slightly and carefully climbed down from the bench. Her legs felt wobbly, like she had just run a very long race. She faced the audience and bent forward in a small, awkward bow. The applause somehow got even louder. Then she walked off the stage as quickly as she could without running. The moment she reached the wings, her mother swept her up into a hug so tight Lily could barely breathe. She didn't mind. She buried her face in her mother's shoulder and held on, her whole body shaking. She wasn't sure if she was happy or scared or relieved, maybe all three at once. "You did it," her mother whispered into her hair. "Baby, you did it. I'm so proud of you, so proud." Behind them, the applause was finally starting to die down. The announcer's voice came through the speakers, thanking the audience and asking everyone to take their seats for a short intermission before the judges announced the results. Lily pulled back and looked up at her mother. "Did I do okay?" Her mother laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Okay, sweetheart, you were incredible. Didn't you hear them? They loved you." Lily shook her head slowly. It didn't feel real. None of it felt real. A few hours ago, she had been sitting in their old car in the parking lot, eating a peanut butter sandwich and trying not to throw up from nerves. Now people she had never met were standing up and cheering for her. It didn't make any sense. They found a quiet corner backstage where they could sit and wait. Other competitors walked past them, some heading to the stage for last-minute practice, others coming back from their performances. A few of them glanced at Lily as they passed. Some looked curious. Others looked something else, something that Lily didn't quite understand. One boy, probably about 14 or 15, stopped right in front of her. He was tall, with neat brown hair and an expensive-looking suit. Lily recognized him from earlier. He had been warming up on one of the practice pianos when they arrived, playing something complicated and fast, his fingers moving like machines. "That was you, wasn't it?" he said. "The one who just played." Lily nodded, not sure what to say. The boy stared at her for a long moment. His expression was hard to read. Then slowly he shook his head. "I've been taking lessons since I was 3, he said. "Private teachers, the best schools, summer programs that cost more than most people make in a year." He paused. "And I've never played like that, not once." Lily didn't know how to respond. Was he angry? Was he making fun of her? She couldn't tell. But then the boy did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a mean smile or a fake one. A real smile, a little sad around the edges. "You've got something special," he said quietly. "Don't ever let anyone take that away from you." Then he walked off, disappearing into the crowd of performers and parents and competition staff. Lily looked up at her mother, confused. Her mother just squeezed her hand and smiled. The intermission lasted about 20 minutes, but to Lily it felt like hours. She tried to sit still, but her legs kept bouncing. Her mother bought her a bottle of water from a vending machine, but she could barely drink it. Her stomach was tied up in knots. Around her she could hear people talking, parents discussing their children's performances, competitors comparing notes, arguing about tempo and technique. A group of teenagers in the corner were looking at something on a phone and whispering to each other. One of them glanced over at Lily, then quickly looked away. Finally, the announcer's voice returned. "Ladies and, if you could please return to your seats. The judges are ready to announce the results." Lily felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. Together, they walked back toward the stage area, finding a spot near the wings where they could see but not be seen. The three judges walked out onto the stage. They looked different than before. The head judge, the older man with silver hair, was walking more slowly, like he was carrying something heavy. The woman who had removed her glasses was still dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The third judge, the one who had cried during Lily's performance, had composed himself, but his eyes were still red. They took their places at the microphone. The audience fell silent. The head judge cleared his throat. He looked out at the crowd for a long moment before speaking. "In my 40 years of judging piano competitions," he began, his voice rough around the edges, "I thought I had seen everything. I have watched prodigies who could play before they could speak. I have witnessed technical perfection that seemed almost superhuman. I have heard performances that were flawless from the first note to the last." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "But today, something happened that I was not prepared for." The audience was completely still. No one moved. No one whispered. Everyone was hanging on his every word. "Music," the judge continued, "is not just about hitting the right notes at the right time. Any machine can do that. Music is about connection. It's about reaching into another person's soul and touching something that words cannot reach. It's about making people feel." He looked down at his notes, then set them aside entirely. Today, an 8-year-old girl walked onto this stage. She was wearing a borrowed dress. Her shoes were too big. She had never taken a formal lesson in her life. By every measure we normally use to judge competitions like this, she should not have been here. Lily felt her cheeks burning. Her mother pulled her close. "But when she sat down at that piano," the judge said, his voice catching slightly, "she taught every single person in this room, including us judges, what music is really supposed to be. She didn't just play the notes. She told us a story. She shared her heart. And I don't think there was a single person in this auditorium who wasn't moved by it." The woman judge leaned toward her own microphone. "I want to add something," she said softly. "I have performed on stages around the world. I have played for presidents and kings. But sitting here today, watching that little girl, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. I felt like I was hearing music for the first time." A murmur ran through the audience. Lily's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The head judge nodded and straightened up. "The judges have made their decision, and I want everyone to know that this is the fastest unanimous decision in the 40-year history of this competition." He looked directly toward the wings, somehow finding Lily in the shadows. "First place goes to Lily." For a moment nothing happened. The words hung in the air, not quite sinking in. Then the auditorium exploded. The applause was even louder than before. People were screaming, cheering, stamping their feet. Someone started chanting her name. Others joined in. The sound was so overwhelming that Lily could feel it vibrating in her chest. Her mother was crying again, laughing and crying at the same time, hugging her so tight that Lily's feet actually lifted off the ground. "You won," her mother kept saying. "You won, baby, you won." Lily couldn't speak. She couldn't think. She could only stand there, wrapped in her mother's arms, listening to the roar of the crowd, trying to understand that this was really happening. A competition official appeared beside them, smiling widely. "Lily, they need you on stage to accept your trophy." Lily looked up at her mother, her eyes wide with something between terror and wonder. Her mother wiped her own tears, then bent down so they were eye to eye. "Go on," she whispered. "Your daddy is watching, make him proud." Lily took a shaky breath. Then she stepped out into the light. The stage looked different now. The lights didn't feel as hot. The piano didn't seem as big. Everything had shifted somehow, like the whole world had tilted slightly and then settled into a new position. Lily walked toward the center of the stage, her borrowed dress swishing around her knees, her too big shoes somehow staying on her feet. The head judge was waiting for her with a golden trophy in his hands. It was beautiful, tall and shiny, with a small piano carved at the top. The kind of thing Lily had only ever seen in pictures or on television. Now it was going to be hers. She stopped in front of the judge, looking up at him. He was smiling, but his eyes were still wet. He knelt down so he was closer to her height. "Young lady," he said, his voice gentle, "I have given out many trophies in my life, but I have never been more honored to give one than I am right now." He placed the trophy in her hands. It was heavier than she expected. She had to hold it with both arms to keep from dropping it. The audience was still clapping. Cameras were flashing from every direction. Lily stood there, clutching her trophy, not sure what she was supposed to do next. The judge stood back up and gestured toward the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words?" Lily's heart jumped. Say something. In front of all these people. She hadn't prepared anything. She didn't know what to say. She looked toward the wings where her mother was standing, hopping for some kind of guidance. Her mother just smiled and nodded. "You can do this." Lily turned back to the microphone. It was too tall for her, so the judge lowered it down to her level. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. Hi." A soft laugh rippled through the audience. Not a mean laugh, a warm one. Lily swallowed hard and tried again. "I don't really know what to say. I never thought I would be here. I never thought anyone would want to hear me play." She paused, looking down at the trophy in her arms. "My daddy taught me that music is magic. He said it can say things that words can't. He used to play for me every night before bed. It was my favorite part of the day." The auditorium had gone very quiet. Everyone was listening. "When he got sick, he couldn't play anymore, and then he went away. And the house got really quiet. I didn't like the quiet, it felt wrong." Lily felt tears starting to build behind her eyes, but she kept going. "So I started to play. I didn't know how. I just watched videos and tried to copy what I saw. I practiced every day because playing made me feel like he was still there, like he could still hear me." She looked up at the audience. She couldn't see their faces because of the lights, but she could feel them. All those people, all those strangers, listening to her story. "I played this piece today because it was his favorite. He used to play it for my mom. And when I play it, I feel like he's sitting right next to me, just like he used to." She hugged the trophy. "So this isn't really for me, it's for him. Because he always told me I was going to do amazing things, and I think maybe he was right." For a moment there was complete silence. Then the audience erupted again, even louder than before if that was possible. People were on their feet. Some of them were openly crying. The judges were clapping along with everyone else, their faces full of something that looked like wonder. Lily's mother rushed onto the stage and wrapped her arms around her daughter. They stood there together, holding the trophy between them, while the whole auditorium celebrated around them. That night everything changed. Someone in the audience had been recording Lily's performance on their phone. They uploaded it to the internet, and within hours it had been shared thousands of times. By the next morning it had been seen by millions. News stations started calling. Reporters wanted interviews. Strangers on the internet were writing about the little girl from Tennessee who had taught herself to play piano from YouTube videos and won a national competition. Her story was everywhere. Letters started arriving, emails, phone calls. Music schools from all over the country wanted to offer her scholarships. Famous pianists reached out, saying they wanted to teach her. Opportunities that Lily and her mother had never imagined suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It was overwhelming, exciting and terrifying and confusing all at once. Lily didn't understand most of it. She was still just an 8-year-old kid. She still liked cartoons and peanut butter sandwiches and playing with the neighbor's dog. Suddenly becoming famous didn't change any of that. But her mother handled it all. She read every letter, answered every email, and carefully considered every offer. She wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of her daughter. She wasn't going to let this new world change who Lily really was. In the end, they chose a music school that felt right. Not the biggest or the one, but one with teachers who understood that Lily was special in ways that couldn't be measured. Teachers who wanted to help her grow, not turn her into something she wasn't. But before any of that started, there was one thing Lily needed to do. 3 weeks after the competition, she and her mother drove back to their small town in Tennessee, back to the little house where she had grown up, back to the community center down the street. The janitor was there, just like always. He was sweeping the floors when Lily walked in, her trophy tucked under her arm. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, and his face broke into a wide smile. "Well, look who it is," he said, "the famous pianist." Lily ran over and hugged him. He laughed and patted her back gently. "I saw you on the news," he said. "You were something else, little one, really something else." Lily pulled back and looked up at him. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You always let me stay late. You always believed in me." The old man shook his head. "I didn't do anything. You did all the work, I just swept the floors." But Lily knew that wasn't true. Sometimes the people who help us the most don't even realize they're doing it. Sometimes just being there, just showing up, is enough to change someone's life. She walked over to the old upright piano in the corner, the same one she had practiced on for years. The keys were still sticky. Some of them still didn't work right, but it looked like the most beautiful piano in the world to her. She sat down on the bench. It felt different now. She had played on a grand piano in front of hundreds of people. She had won a national competition. But sitting here in this quiet room with the janitor watching and her mother standing by the door felt more important than any of that. She placed her fingers on the keys. And she played. Not the complicated piece from the competition. Something simpler. A melody she had made up herself back when she was first learning. Back when she was just a sad little girl trying to find her father in the music. The notes floated through the empty room, soft and sweet. The janitor stopped sweeping and listened. Her mother leaned against the doorframe, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. Lily closed her eyes and let the music carry her away. She thought about her father. She thought about how much she missed him. But she also thought about how lucky she was. Lucky to have had him even for a little while. Lucky to have this gift. Lucky to have people who loved her. The music faded away, the last note hanging in the air like a promise. Lily opened her eyes and smiled. She was going to do amazing things. Her father had always known it. And now, so did the rest of the world.